Welcome to AI Horror Stories. Prepare to be chilled. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell for daily doses of AI-generated fright. First story is Love Me. The Love Me game is a scary ritual that comes from a remote island in the Pacific Ocean. The ritual summons an evil spirit called Rakunene. This spirit can tell you if someone loves you. It can also kill the person you love if they reject you or turn you down. Rakunene is an evil spirit from the Gilbert Islands in the Pacific Ocean, sometimes called the South Seas. This was a popular ritual that was often used by the islanders. It involved calling this evil spirit to find out if someone was in love with them. To find out if a girl or boy loves you or not, you can ask the spirit of Rakunene. You take a long leaf, preferably a coconut leaf, and tear it down the middle, being careful to stop before you tear it in half completely. Then, you hold it between the finger and thumb of your right hand and gently stroke it as you whisper the following chant. Tell me Rakunene. Tell me if she loves me. Tell me if she hates me. Tell me, tell me, tell me. After you repeat this chant 3 times, tear the leaf in half. Then, wrap each half of the leaf around both of your index fingers and compare them. If the tips of the leaves are the same height, he or she hates you. If the tips are different heights, they love you. Of course, Rakunene could also be used for evil purposes. If a boy or girl was rejected by the one they loved, they could summon Rakunene to take revenge. To perform this ritual, you have to take a hair from the boy or girl's head and wrap it around your thigh. You have to keep it there for 3 days, and on the morning of the 4th day, burn it on a pile of leaves. Performing this ritual will invoke the spirit of Rakunene to punish the boy or girl who rejected you. It causes them to rip off their clothes, disfigures them, tortures them and eventually kills them. Years ago, a British officer who was stationed in the Gilbert Islands claimed to have witnessed a death caused by Rakunene. One afternoon, a young girl was found lying naked on her bedroom floor, moaning in pain. Her face was burning hot and her body was terribly swollen. Her eyes were wide open, staring straight ahead into space, and her pupils were distended. When he asked why nobody was trying to help her, the locals told him that there was nothing they could do for her. A boy she rejected had cursed her and sent Rakunene to kill her. She was as good as dead and there was no way to save her. The girl began violently thrashing back and forth, clawing at her own flesh and biting anyone who dared to come near her. Suddenly, she started shrieking, Rakunene. Rakunene, over and over. Then, as he watched in horror, her body went stiff and she died. Later, when an autopsy was performed, no cause of death could be found. The girl was perfectly healthy. There was no reason for her to have died, but yet she was dead. As time went by, this ritual became so popular and there were so many deaths caused by it that the government of the Gilbert Islands outlawed it, and anyone who tried to invoke the spirit of Rakunene was sent to jail. Note, if the love of your life rejects you, do not summon Rakunene to kill them. Second story is The Slender Man. The Slender Man is a creepypasta story about a strange paranormal creature that abducts children. Slender Man is often described as being an unusually tall man, dressed in a black suit, white shirt and black tie. He has long, thin arms and legs, and his face is said to be completely blank and is sometimes shown with tentacles growing out of his back. According to the Slender Man myths, the entity can cause amnesia, bouts of coughing, and paranoid behavior in individuals. He is often depicted hiding in forests. On May 31, 2014, in Waukesha, Wisconsin, United States, 2 12-year-old girls, Anissa Wire and Morgan Geyser, lured their friend Peyton Lutner into a forest and stabbed her 19 times in an attempt to appease the fictional character Slender Man. Lutner crawled to a road where she was found, and recovered after 6 days in the hospital. Wire and Geyser were found not guilty by mental disease or defect and committed to mental health institutions for sentences of 25 years to life and 40 years to life, respectively. After 7 years, Wire was granted early release and will be under supervision until age 37. The stabbing took place in Davids Park, a wooded area near Waukesha, Wisconsin, during a game of hide-and-seek on May 31, 2014. The perpetrators, Anissa Wire, born November 10, 2001, and Morgan Geyser, born May 16, 2002, pinned down Peyton Isabella Lutner, also known as Bella, a nickname used at the time of the crime, and stabbed her 19 times in the arms, legs, and torso with a 5-inch-long, 13 centimeters, blade. 2 wounds were to major organs, one missed a major artery of her heart by less than a millimeter, and another went through her diaphragm, cutting into her liver and stomach. Wire and Geyser told Lutner to lie down while they would find help, but they did not get any upon leaving. Afterwards, Lutner dragged herself to a nearby road where she was found by a cyclist. The cyclist called 911 when he saw her. Around 5 hours later, Wire and Geyser were apprehended near Interstate 94 at Steinhaffel's furniture store, after walking 4.9 miles, 7.9 kilometers. The knife used in the stabbing was in a bag they carried. Their goal was to meet Slender Man at his mansion, called Slender Mansion, in the Nicolet National Forest, roughly a 100-mile hike from their location. During their interviews, Geyser was described as feeling no empathy while Wire was described as feeling guilty for stabbing the victim, but both felt that the attack was needed to appease Slender Man. Lutner left the hospital 7 days after the attack. She returned to school in September 2014. Following the investigation, Geyser was charged with attempted first-degree homicide, a Class A felony, and Wire was charged with attempted second-degree homicide, a Class B felony. Due to the nature of the offenses, both Wire and Geyser were waived out of juvenile court to be tried as adults. In 2017, Wire pleaded guilty to being a party to attempted second-degree homicide. 16. A jury then found her not guilty by mental disease or defect. Geyser accepted a plea offer under which she would not go to trial, and would be evaluated by psychiatrists to determine how long she should be placed in a mental hospital. She later pleaded guilty but was found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect, and was diagnosed with schizophrenia, from which her father also suffers. Wire was sentenced to 25 years to life, an indeterminate sentence involving at least 3 years locked confinement and involuntary treatment in a state psychiatric institute, followed by communal supervision until age 37. Geyser was given the maximum sentence, 40 years to life, an indeterminate sentence involving at least 3 years locked confinement, in addition to involuntary treatment in a state psychiatric institute until complete resolution of symptoms or until age 53, whichever may happen first, followed by continued communal supervision, periodic re-evaluations, and/or reinstitution, and further treatment as needed, as required by the sentence imposed. While Geyser will periodically have the opportunity to petition for her release from a mental health facility in the future, she will remain under institutional care for the duration of the sentence. During her trial, Geyser had been committed to the Winnebago Mental Health Institute, and was the youngest patient there. At a court hearing on March 10, 2021, Wire, who was by then 19, submitted a letter to the court stating that she was sorry and deeply regretful for the agony, pain, and fear I have caused, not just to Lutner, but to my community as well. Wire stated that, I hate my actions from May 31, 2014, but through countless hours of therapy, I no longer hate myself for them. On July 1, 2021, Waukesha County Judge Michael Boren ordered Wire released from the Winnebago Mental Health Institute, gave state officials 60 days to draw up a conditional release plan, and required that Wire be assigned State Department of Health Services case managers to track her progress until she is 37 years old, the length of her commitment. On September 13, 2021, Wire was released with multiple stipulations to include 24-hour GPS monitoring requiring her to not leave Waukesha County without permission. Wire will also have her internet usage monitored, and will not be allowed to use any forms of social media. Wire will also be required to take medication, and will be personally escorted to regular counseling sessions by a caseworker. She will also be required to live with her father during her probation. In the aftermath of the stabbing, the creepypasta wiki was blocked throughout the Waukesha School District. On the Tuesday following the stabbing, Slender Man creator Eric Knudsen said, "I am deeply saddened by the tragedy in Wisconsin and my heart goes out to the families of those affected by this terrible act." Sloshatrain, the administrator of the creepypasta wiki, said that the stabbing was an isolated incident that did not accurately represent the creepypasta community. He also stated that the creepypasta wiki was a literary website, and that they did not condone murder or satanic rituals. Members of the creepypasta community held a 24-hour live stream on YouTube June 13 to 14, 2014, to raise money for the stabbing victim. Joe Jozwiski, an administrator on a creepypasta website, said the purpose of the stream was to show that members of the community cared for the victim, and did not condone real-world violence because they enjoyed fiction that contains violence. On August 12, Governor Scott Walker issued a proclamation declaring Wednesday, August 13, 2014, Purple Hearts for Healing Day, and encouraged the people of Wisconsin to wear purple on that day to honor the victim of the stabbing. He also praised the strength and determination exhibited by Luckner during her recovery. The stabbing resulted in extensive debate about the role of the Internet in society and its effect on children. Russell Jack, Waukesha Police Chief, said that the stabbing should be a wake-up call for all parents, adding that the Internet is full of information and wonderful sites that teach and entertain, but that it can also be full of dark and wicked things. John Egelhoff, a retired agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, argued that the Internet had become a black hole with the ability to expose children to a more sinister world. Egelhoff suggested that the best way to avoid future incidents was for parents to keep track of their children's online habits, and to educate them on the differences between right and wrong. Shira Chess, an assistant professor of mass media arts at the University of Georgia, stated that creepypasta was no more dangerous than stories about vampires or zombies. Third story is Squidward suicide. As you may be aware, SpongeBob SquarePants is a popular animated TV series that is broadcast on Nickelodeon. It is one of Nickelodeon's highest-rated shows and is currently the longest-running series on the channel. Despite being one of the best-loved cartoons on TV, few people are aware of a very disturbing incident that occurred in Nickelodeon's animation studios during the production of the series a few years ago. In 2005, Nickelodeon's animation studios had recently completed production on the SpongeBob movie and the entire staff was somewhat sapped of creativity, so it took them longer to begin work on the new season of TV episodes. The delay lasted much longer than it should have due to a very upsetting problem with the first episode of Season 4. The lead animators and sound editors were in the editing room to review the final cut of S04E01. They received a copy of the episode and gathered around the screen to watch. The title of the episode was supposed to be Fear of a Krabby Patty, but when the title card came up on the screen, it read, Squidward Suicide. Everyone in the room was more than a little confused. The SpongeBob SquarePants theme tune played as usual and the episode began with Squidward practicing on his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes. SpongeBob was laughing and Squidward stopped playing to yell at him to keep it down as he had a concert that night and needed to practice. SpongeBob said okay and went with Patrick to see Sandy. The Bubbles Splash screen came up, followed by the end of Squidward's concert. It was at this point that the episode began to get very strange. As Squidward's concert ended, there was discontented murmuring in the crowd and they began to boo him loudly and maliciously. Squidward looked visibly afraid. SpongeBob was standing in front of the crowd and he, too, was booing. Even more odd was the fact that all of the characters had hyper-realistic eyes. They were very detailed and their pupils were glowing red. The next scene showed Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed, looking very depressed and forlorn. Behind him, in his porthole window, a dreary night sky could be seen. The unsettling part was that there was absolutely no sound. Squidward just sat there in silence for about 30 seconds, then he started to sob softly. Then, he put his tentacle hands over his eyes and cried quietly for a full minute. Gradually, the sound grew louder and a slight breeze could be heard in the background. The camera slowly zoomed in on Squidward's face and his sobbing grew louder and louder, full of hurt and anger. The sound of the wind became more severe, as if a storm was brewing. Very faintly, in the background, something that sounded like hollow laughter could be heard. It came at odd intervals and never lasted more than a second. After 30 seconds of this, the screen blurred and twitched violently and something flashed over the screen, as if a single frame had been replaced. The lead animation editor paused the video and rewound it, frame by frame. Suddenly, something horrible flashed up on the screen. It was a still photo of a young boy. His face was mangled and bloody and one of his eyeballs was dangling out of its socket. His stomach had been sliced open and his intestines lay in a pile beside him. The editors gathered around the screen couldn't believe what they were seeing. They pressed play and continued to watch the video, hoping that it was all just some sick joke being played on them by the animators. On the screen, Squidward was still sobbing, but the sound was louder than before. There seemed to be blood coming from his eyes and running down his cheeks. The blood did not seem to be animated. It looked all too real. The wind sounded like a raging storm. The deep, unsettling laughter became more and more frequent. Suddenly, the screen twitched again. One of the editors paused the video and rewound it. Another single-frame photo flashed up on the screen. This time, it was a little girl. She was lying face down in a pool of blood. Her left eyeball was hanging by a thread and her entrails were piled on top of her. There were deep cuts all over her back. One of the interns in the room said he felt sick and rushed out into the corridor. The editor clicked a button and the episode resumed playing. Squidward was silent again and there was no sound at all. He put his tentacles down and his eyes were now done in hyperrealistic and detailed. They were bleeding, bloodshot and pulsating. He just stared at the camera, as if he was watching the viewer. Everyone in the room shifted uncomfortably. A few seconds later, he started sobbing again, but this time he didn't cover his eyes. The sound was loud and piercing and screams rang out in the background. Bloody tears were dripping down his face as the wind began blowing again and the deep-voiced laughter returned. Another still photo flashed up on the screen and the editor paused the video again. This time, the photo was of a different young boy. His right eyeball was hanging out of its socket and a large hand was reaching into his open stomach and pulling out his intestines. Everyone in the room gasped at this and one of the sound editors vomited on the floor. Everybody was shaking and frightened. Someone rushed out to fetch a mop. The editor stopped the video and said that he would call the producer and show him the horrifying photos contained in the video. 15 minutes later, the producer burst into the room and demanded to know why he had been called down to the studio. The editor didn't answer him. He just pressed play and the episode continued on the screen. Squidward was just staring at the camera, his face in close-up. The soundtrack became silent and a deep voice was heard whispering, "Do it." The camera pulled back, revealing that Squidward was holding a shotgun in his tentacle hands. He suddenly raised the shotgun, placed the barrel in his mouth and pulled the trigger. There was a huge explosion and realistic blood and brain matter splattered against the wall behind him. His head disintegrated and his body fell sideways and collapsed on the bed. The last 5 excruciating seconds of the episode show his body on the bed, on his side, one eye dangling on what's left of his head above the floor, staring blankly at it. Then the episode cut to black. The producer was furious and demanded to know what the heck was going on. Most people left the room, feeling sick to their stomachs. Just a handful of people remained in the editing room, attempting to figure out what exactly had gone wrong with the episode. The only explanation they could come up with was that, somewhere along the line in the production process, the video footage had been edited by someone. The logs were consulted and everyone who had worked on the video was accounted for. The editors attempted to analyze the video file, but there was no timestamp. All of the video equipment involved in the production line was examined for viruses, malware and other malicious files, but everything checked out fine. Due to the nature of the photos, the footage was handed over to the police, but nothing came of it. None of the children in the photos was ever identified and the video files yielded no clues or physical evidence. To this day, nobody at Nickelodeon's animation studios can explain what happened.